All right, well, with that, we'll go ahead and get into this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. We're talking about the NFL here, obviously, with the AFC and NFC championship games. We'll take a look at the look-ahead lines that are available at DSI for Super Bowl 52. And we'll also talk a little bit of UFC 220 here. We've got a sharp play on UFC 220 and then pretty good action on the main event between Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou. I apologize if I butchered his name. But that's a fight that certainly has some interest to me, with Miocic being a guy from the Cleveland area. So good to chat about that, do something a little bit different here on this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. All right, I'm joined now by Brent, risk manager down in Costa Rica at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going today, man?
Well, I was hoping I'd be able to rub it in that how hot and sunny it is down here, but we're still sitting. It's really weird for January. It usually is hot and sunny, and I could rub your face in it, but we're actually been cloudy for almost a week now, and cool by local standards, which would be around 25, 26 degrees Celsius. So not quite cool, but it's still nice. There's other places, there's other places that I'd rather be, but probably not where you are.
Yeah, you can't see me, but I'm playing the world's tiniest violin right now, feeling really sorry for you that it's been rainy and cloudy. It's I'm sure you'll find a way to deal with it. And hey, you're going to be inside all weekend anyway, because we've got 2 huge NFL games coming up this weekend. Before we get into specifics, what's the action like? You pretty happy with how things are going so far?
Yeah, very good. I mean, the thing for me, too, the biggest thing I can really look for is counts kind of being close to each other, and that's the case with both of these games. I do have slight wager counts out one way or another, but nothing one-sided at all. And, if you look at these teams in terms of where they finished the regular season in terms of, rankings for, the defensive points allowed, offensive points scored, all that kind of stuff, it kind of, we are really looking at, probably 4 of the 5 best teams, at least statistically speaking. That's kind of reflected in how balanced our action is.
All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in here and start looking at this one. Game 311, 312, Jacksonville takes on New England. And I got to say, Brent, we've seen over the last couple of days here some Jacksonville money hitting the board, and now you've got a 7.5 up on this game as I'm looking right now.
Yeah, we actually, it's interesting on both these sides. We took action on both sides. Totally didn't take any action on either one of them, but I did get sharp action on Jacksonville. And I'm kind of, I was expecting it too, which is, I'm not often writing stuff like this because it's really a guessing game in terms of where the sharp action is going to go. But when the line was 9 and there was some 9.5s out there, at that point we were 9.5 as well, and everyone kind of crept down to 9. So we stayed 9 when everyone else was. And sure enough, sharp money came on Jacksonville plus 9. And I, when I saw it come up at 7.5 and get bet up to 9 and 9.5, I just thought it just felt like 7.5 was really the right number. And now it's there, and I think it's just going to stay there. I do have, my count is dead even on this one, completely balanced in terms of the actual individual number of bets I've taken on this game. I've got slightly more money line money on the dog, which is no surprise. Slightly more, dollar volume on the favorite, but Jacksonville plus 9 is where I took sharp action. Total on this one, slight favor to the under in terms of the count, but this one opened at 46.5, and I'm sitting 46.5 right now, so nothing of note in terms of the total.
Well, I think that this is a fine line to walk because you're getting sharp Jacksonville money early on in the week. As you said, your books are pretty balanced right now, but you've got to figure New England money is coming. And furthermore, one of the things that we've kind of picked up on here with previous guests throughout the week on this show is that when it was 9.5, you could understand why. A little bit of teaser protection built in because New England being teased under the key number would be very, very popular. Now it's gotten to a point where you can't worry about that, because you just need to try and get some more straight money on New England. So I think it's been a fascinating line to watch, to see it, kind of go up initially and now come back down.
Yeah, in both of these games, I think, again, they seem to be so evenly matched. The spreads are, at 7.5 with New England being at home, of course. Jacksonville unproven, having not been there. It's kind of where the numbers as high it is, and New England obviously as strong as they are always in the playoffs. But, like I said, if you're looking at the defensive points allowed, I think Jacksonville regular season was 2 overall. New England was number 5 overall. scoring offense, it flipped around. New England was 2 overall. Jacksonville was 5 overall. So, I mean, these teams, at least on paper, so evenly matched. You do kind of get worried in terms of Jacksonville's road performance. I think they were like 4-4 on the year on the road. But obviously, they had that big win last week in Pittsburgh, which kind of gives a little more faith. So I think in terms of the betting public, I think I have a better chance of this game being balanced simply because, you're right that we typically would get a rush of New England money. But, Jacksonville did look so good last week. And the number is 7.5. It just seems like the right number in terms of balancing action on this one.
Well, and right now as I'm looking here, and you can correct me if something's changed in real time, I'm looking at this game 7.5 flat on both sides, so -110. There are some indicators out there in the market. A book like Pinnacle, one of the sharpest out there in the offshore marketplace, 7.5, the dog -15. Is it possible? Is it conceivable that we actually see this number come down to 7?
I don't think so. And again, who's to say? More sharp money comes in on Jacksonville and drives it down? Sure, because like I said, my chart is pretty much balanced in terms of the individual number of bets I've taken. So if I've got public action split on the game and I've already taken sharp action on Jacksonville plus the 9, if I get more Jacksonville money, yeah, that could drive it down to 7. But I think, that could be one of those points where other sharps come the other way on New England. I just, my feeling is the number is going to sit right around where it is.
I think something that's really interesting about this game is, as I mentioned, you saw New England come up a little bit early in the week. Now you're seeing it come down. And again, this may not be necessarily steam. This may be a little bit of worry about the reported Tom Brady hand injury. Didn't practice on Thursday. It's not like Tom Brady really needs to practice, I wouldn't think. But, still, it is worth considering and maybe grabbing some line value in the event that for some crazy reason he is out for this game or is well less than 100%. So, that's kind of fascinating to me too, is I sort of wonder if we get a good Brady practice report on Friday, and of course we're recording this Thursday around, this is about 5:15 Eastern time. If we get a good Brady practice report on Friday, do you think we see this number go back up a little bit then?
No, I think it's funny. I mean, you know how the Patriots are with their injury information, and it was like it was officially announced that he was did not practice on Thursday. Now they're saying that he did practice on Thursday, so it's kind of funny. I mean, like I said, the Patriots are never fully honest. It seems about injuries to any of their guys, but it looks like he did get out there. Maybe it was late in the practice. He jammed it on Wednesday, and I think Thursday he did get out there late. So all indications are that he's going to be fine, and obviously he's going to be okay, and he's going to be out there. I mean, he jammed his hand a little bit. I'm sure that's something that that happens all the time with these guys. But no, I mean, like the sharp money that came in, it was wasn't an indication because anyone thought Brady wasn't going to be out there. So I think, like I said, does this 7.5 just looks like the right number to me, Adam?
All right, last thing I'll ask you about here is how hard are you rooting for Jacksonville? I mean, right now your books are balanced, but in terms of looking at Super Bowl exposure from a futures standpoint, New England even being the favorite, even with a low price, I'm sure you took some pretty good chunks of change on that. How much does Jacksonville help you getting to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville, it's kind of a catch-22 because in terms of the actual futures, we didn't take very much money on Jacksonville at all. So it's it's quite a good position for us. We did take quite a bit of money on New England, of course, but the price was always so low. So neither of those teams really hurt us that much. Neither does Minnesota really. Minnesota's not a bad spot for us either. Philadelphia might be the highest one just because they had the higher price out there. So none of the teams that are out there really hurt us much. The only kind of catch-22 is that now it's a Super Bowl. You're going to get, no matter who's there, you're going to get a ton of volume. But in terms of, marketability and stuff like that, New England is obviously the team that people want to talk about. So in terms of fanfare, yeah, you want to root for, New England a little bit more, and people are going to be like, Jacksonville wants to see them in there. But, I mean, regardless, our volume is going to be fantastic for the big game.
Well, and that's the thing, and this is something I was talking about a little bit on our Wednesday segment with Brian Leonard, is that I wouldn't mind seeing somebody other than New England being in the Super Bowl just because, New England's been such a dominant team for so long. But selfishly speaking, in terms of thinking ahead to props, thinking ahead to how I want to approach the Super Bowl, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in myself in terms of trying to handicap what Blake Bortles is going to do in the Super Bowl against a top 5 defense, whether it's Minnesota or Philadelphia. Like, from a prop standpoint, it worries me. From a side and total standpoint, it worries me. I'd almost kind of rather see New England just because I think it would give me a little bit more confidence, a little more certainty in how I want to play the game looking forward.
Yeah, I'm of the. I always like to see new teams. I always like, no matter what the sport is, whether it's basketball, hockey, baseball, whatever. I just like to see new teams in there. So I definitely would like to see someone other than New England in the Super Bowl. I'm very content with anyone else, like Minnesota or Philadelphia on that side. I'm just, to be honest with you, I'm just a little bit tired of New England.
No, you're not the only one. Believe me, I know. Based on what I've heard this week and what I've heard from people and seen from people on Twitter, you are most definitely not the only one there. Let's move on to game 313, 314. We will have a new team representing the NFC here. Whether it's Minnesota, whether it's Philadelphia, remains to be seen. Brent, I was kind of surprised, honestly, that this number opened 3.5 at some shops out there. It just sort of felt like it was screaming for Philadelphia money, and that has come in.
Yeah, and it was sharp money, too, that came in on Philadelphia. So, as I mentioned earlier, we got sharp money on both the sides, nothing on either of the totals. But Jacksonville plus the 9 was sharp. Philadelphia had +3, plus 0.5, or even plus 3.5, minus 115 was both sharp on the Eagles. So I do have sharp money on the Eagles. My wager count is not quite 2 to 1, it's about 1.5 times favoring the Vikings. So that's a wager count, of about 1.5 times favoring the Minnesota. That's the actual individual number of bets we've taken on this game. So you're right there. It was kind of maybe just a higher number. And again, looking at Philadelphia, what they did last week, but it's tough to say. I mean, Minnesota is just such a complete team. I mean, yeah, they weren't say top 5 in scoring offense or something like that, but they were number 1 in defense in terms of number of points allowed. And you look at Philadelphia's numbers in terms of what their offense did all season long. Well, I mean, that was with a different quarterback at the helm. So it's quite an interesting story there. And looking at the wager count, like I said, I'm not surprised at all that I was going to have more Vikings money, and that's kind of held true. Total wise, even my wager count on the total, it's almost bang even on this one. So, looking at these 4 games really in terms of account and money, point of view right now, they're really good. They're setting up really well for us.
This is a really, really difficult game for me to handicap. I mean, I could certainly understand the position of taking Jacksonville plus the points, especially if you think the Patriots-Jaguars game is going to be low scoring. I can also understand taking New England because they've covered 28 of the last 36. And if anyone's going to blow out a defense like Jacksonville's, it's going to be New England. This game, though, man, there are so many arguments for both sides. I think it's a really, really challenging handicap. You look at how both teams won last week. Minnesota with the walk-off winner, first time in NFL history in a playoff game. Philadelphia goal line stand against an Atlanta team that had red zone problems all season long. This is a game to me where you've got a low total, you've got a tight spread, and yet it feels high variance to me. So what do you think the count's going to look like by the time we actually get to kickoff here?
I think we're going to need Philadelphia slightly in terms of our actual money. We're going to have more bets on Minnesota. I feel comfortable saying that. It's kind of held true so far, and that just seems like the direction things are going. And as well, if you look out on the market, I mean, there are books out there. I'm using 3 flat because of the money that's come in so far. And my money basically is dead even now in terms of the sharp action I took on Philadelphia being drowned out by public money on Minnesota. But there's books out there that are using like 3-15 and stuff like that. So the general trend looks like that money is coming in on Philadelphia, perhaps sharp money elsewhere. And like I said, I'm sure other books have kind of the same situation as me in terms of actual bets having more individual wagers on Minnesota. So I think this one's going to hang around where it is in terms of Minnesota 3 or maybe 3-15. And again, I mean, it is a tough one to handicap. It's obviously, it's probably going to be cold in Philadelphia. I think weather's not going to be an issue in terms of rain and stuff like that. I think there's like a slight chance of rain. So you're going to have good conditions, it looks like, in both of these games. It's just coming down to how do you handicap these two teams. And again, talk about how Minnesota, how they got the job done last week. I mean, 17-0 at halftime and then needing that play at the end of the game to win it was, it was just like kind of a shocking and surprising game, I think. Now, again, the Philadelphia offense, I think, is the biggest question mark here.
All right, let's look at some of the look-ahead lines for Super Bowl 52, and obviously these are influenced by the fact that Minnesota would be at home if they do win the NFC Championship game, as we've talked about throughout the week here. Let's start with the Patriots versus Vikings hypothetical. Actually, let me start with this question first before we look at the actual look-ahead lines and matchups. What's the value for you in terms of putting these numbers out? Because if New England blows out Jacksonville, you have to adjust the number anyway. If Minnesota blows out Philadelphia or vice versa, you'd have to adjust the number anyway. So what is the goal? What are you looking to achieve by putting these look-ahead lines out there?
Honestly, it's more about fun. I mean, we put lower limits on these things. Of course, we're not taking massive bets from sharp guys and stuff like that. So, if anything else, you're just getting a general indication of where more public guys are leaning. And often it's, not a surprise which way they're going to lean. You can kind of predict which way they're going to go. And, we talk about our counts and stuff like that, where, New England versus whoever is heavy in terms of the count right now. Anyone against Jacksonville is kind of the same way with that. So not a whole lot of surprise in terms of what we found out so far from this. One thing I do want to backtrack just a minute, because you did mention the ending of that New Orleans Minnesota game. I always say to people, like, you want to talk about like meaningless touchdowns and stuff like that, and always having an interest in the game in terms of betting and stuff like that. That game, how it ended, of course, the number. I mean, fortunately for me, I was like -5 on Minnesota almost all week long, but I know places that they were 5.5 and 6 and stuff like that. So the fact at the end where they took a knee on that extra point was huge. I mean, it was not good for us. And if they kicked the extra point and won by 6, that would have turned our decision quite dramatically. But I just, I like mentioning stuff like that because people see it and they say, oh, wow, it's not a big deal. But if you had like +5, it was a big deal.
That was a fascinating ending. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again, where you had Kai Forbath just absolutely bury that 52, 53-yarder. I mean, that thing was dead center. And then the Saints go down. Their guy, Will Lutz, kicks a clutch field goal. And it's like, after you watch the College Football National Championship game and, you got one kicker burying a 51-yarder, you got the other guy shanking one from 30, you kind of like, is this how it's supposed to look? And then you get the blown tackle and then the disaster that was waiting 10 minutes for the Saints to come back out onto the field so Minnesota could take a knee. Like, it was chaotic. I mean, I don't think I'll ever see anything like that again.
Yeah, that blown tackle too was just. I mean, you can hear I'm speechless. I just don't know. I mean, it was like he ducked his head and closed his eyes and kind of like looked up and said, "Where did he go?"
And not only that, he took out the only guy that had a chance to tackle Diggs too. He flew forward. He took out the only guy that was within 15 yards of him. And well, now we get the Vikings here, and we'll see if they're able to bounce back, from such a big emotional win. But if they are, looking ahead to Super Bowl 52, if they take on the New England Patriots. Now, this is interesting because this is something you and I talked about before we started recording here. Over at 5 Dimes right now, they've got New England -3 +105. BetOnline's got New England -2.5 -$1.18. You've got Pick'em, but it's the juice that's really important to consider here.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about like certain things that people can do to kind of like educate themselves in terms of how how the bookmakers work and stuff like that. And definitely, one of those things is taking like a money line or a spread and equating them one to another. So yeah, I mean, I am sitting at a pick on this game, pick -135. Now, basically, I think like pick -140, 35 is kind of the equivalent to like a line of Patriots -2 or 2.5 kind of thing. So you look at the market and say, yeah, one book's using 2.5 and we're using pick -135, but in essence they're almost the same number. Now, we did open these numbers. We kind of like coded the numbers, and that we're going to stay on a pick. We're not going to actually move the spread. We're just going to move the money line, and we have gone from -115 up to -135 because all the action that we took on the Patriots. So again, we're looking ahead in terms of how these help us. It's just kind of a confirmation, I guess, of where the public is going to bet on things. Now, the big question mark, of course, is where sharps are going to bet on these games, and generally they don't bet on these kind of things because we have low limits. It's just kind of out there for fun. There's a bit of marketing fun and stuff like that. So this is the one game, though, probably the biggest decision we have in terms of one-way action, wager count. Just again, this is strictly public action, about 10-1 favoring New England. So New England, like I said, started at pick 15. We're up to -135 right now. That's obviously a big indication of where the public's going to go if that happens to be the matchup.
Yeah, and again, like you said, I mean, that's basically equitable to 2.5, maybe a little bit of extra juice on the side, because 5 Dimes right now with the -3 +105 spread at -145 on the money line. So, again, I mean, it may seem crazy to have a pick thrown up there, but when you factor in the juice, you do effectively have, a 2.5 or maybe a 3, even money, 3 +105, something like that on this game. But I think what is really challenging and really interesting about this line is that, we have a unique situation here in that Minnesota would be the home team. This is the first time in Super Bowl history that a team would be playing the Super Bowl in its own stadium. And there seems to be a lot of difference of opinion in terms of how much home field that's actually worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any game, it is a big deal for sure. Again, you take a look at this game in Minneapolis. I mean, that's just like a strange spot. So obviously, it's extra motivation for them to get there. I mean, what a big deal, what a party that would be if they got the job done there. Yeah, it's one of those interesting spots in terms of when we put up these numbers too. You kind of have to factor in these things. We're not talking about who's sitting on our neutral field. We're like, okay, yeah, we're at a pick on this one, but Minnesota's basically at home now. You just want to say, like we talked about the equating point spreads to money lines and stuff like that. When you've got a 2.5 point spread, the favorite, their chance of winning is roughly reflected in 54.5%. And again, these are kind of like math that people should, kind of educate themselves on and figure out what these things mean. When you look at 54.5% and equate that to a money line, your break-even point is minus 120. So really, in terms of the fact that we had like minus 115 and minus 20 out there on the Patriots, it is almost the same in terms of, reflection of the point spreads, the 2 and 2.5. So I think we're in the ballpark here. And again, with the fact that the Vikings are at home, I think people will kind of forget that too when they bet these kind of things. They're like, oh yeah, I bet the Patriots had a pick and I got Minnesota, and Minnesota's basically at home. I never thought of that one.
All right, well, let's talk about the Patriots versus Eagles hypothetical matchup here, and then this game would revert back to being in a neutral site, and we'll talk about Minnesota being the home team against Jacksonville here in a minute, but this would be a neutral site game, New England, Philadelphia. What number are you looking at right now, and what's kind of the thought process behind that?
Yeah, this is the highest number we put out now is Patriots minus 6.5. We opened like 6.5 minus 115. We took New England money on that. Again, no surprise. Wager count almost like 5-1 in terms of the number of bets we've taken. So 5 times the number of bets on New England. So we're at 6.5 minus 125. And again, it's one of those things in terms of you probably just want to stay off the number 7 in terms of throwing these out. Now again, we're not getting a ton of action because we're not taking max bets on these things, but our wager count is quite high on this. So it's again, it's a good indicator of where we're going with this number, and 6.5 minus 125 right now where we are isn't stopping the public guys from betting the Patriots. So yeah, I mean, if this happened to be the matchup, I mean, surely the number would be on 7 based on what we've seen so far.
I guess that's one thing too. It does kind of give you a little bit of an indication on where the market may show up. And one thing I do want to mention here at this point in time is that if you bet Patriots minus 6.5 against the Eagles and the Vikings beat the Eagles, it's not like it's a losing ticket. You just get that refunded because that game wasn't actually played. So it's not like you're gambling in terms of picking the matchup. You do have to have those two teams for your ticket to have action. All right, so if we get a Jaguars upset, and, judging by the sharp action we've seen so far, it wouldn't be that outlandish of a thing. If Jacksonville went, quote-unquote, on the road to take on Minnesota in the Super Bowl, what number do you have right there?
Yeah, I've got Minnesota 6 on that one, and pretty decent two-way action on this one. Again, the wager count isn't crazy high, but just slightly more bets on the Vikings minus 6, minus 115. But good two-way action on this one. Jacksonville's a dog, of course, in this matchup as well. And the only matchup the Jaguars are favorite would be against the Eagles, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and let's talk about that line here. Jags a favorite over the Eagles, as you mentioned. And again, obviously this becomes a neutral site game. So what's the line that you've got for that?
Yeah, we put the Jags 2.5, and again, I pretty much haven't had to touch this one either. I do have slightly more wagers on the Eagles, but just twice as many bets, which isn't much. Again, we are taking lower limits on this one, so I got the Jaguars minus 2.5, minus 115. Again, just two times the one isn't a flood of action on one side or the other, but just kind of again, it's kind of like just a good indication in terms of playing around with these things and seeing where money's going to come out. And one thing I want to mention too is these numbers. Like I know there are in the market. Other people have come up with other numbers, and we basically, we did our own numbers, with our own power ratings and stuff like that. We kind of sat down and said, what number do we think will work in terms of balancing action? We would put these up. So the thing too is you can see some variance in the market in terms of what prices other people are using.
All right, and before we transition over to UFC 220 here for a couple minutes, I just want to throw out what the format's going to be here. Next week, we'll talk with Brent briefly for the odds report. We'll look at the Super Bowl 52 line. Also the total, see if there's been some sharp action that's come in. When we talk to him in 2 weeks' time, we'll hit up some of the props that have seen sharp action as well, and then also revisit the Super Bowl 52 total. So next week will be kind of a smash and grab, real quick segment in terms of the action we've seen so far, the thought process behind the number, how the conference championship games went, that type of thing. But then in 2 weeks, we'll add some prop flair to the show as well. So, Brent, that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, too, on what I'm looking to do here over the next couple of weeks. But we do have a little bit of sharp action for UFC 220. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I've got these two fights, the main event, co-main event, stuff like that. we always get really good action on these fights when you got big guys throwing the gloves for the main event. So I did take sharp action. The only sharp action I really have on the card right now, and again, generally speaking, we do get fight night, we could just get a flood of action on this one. So this is going on Saturday the 20th in Boston there. So I mean, our action is going to be fantastic. But right now, I'm just really impressed with, especially the main event with Miocic and Ngannou. Just tons of action, two-way action on both these fighters. And I do have, my money's dead even pretty much, but my wager count is about 4-1 right now on Miocic. So him being the dog, of course, is kind of a surprising spot when you talk about the champ as a dog. The sharp action I did take on this card, though, was on the Cormier fight. We had a prop up there in terms of whether or not the fight would go the distance, and the sharp guy actually laid the minus 300. That price has moved up quite a bit since that bet. Now, again, you're talking about a couple of guys one guy who can really bang with, help me with his name, Ozdemir. I mean, he's just basically a banger, and I guess the general feeling from the sharps is he's either going to get, win by first round knockout, or he's going to get gassed badly. So the kind of under, not that, an under 1.5 that they play, but the play was in terms of the prop, whether this fight would go the distance or not. Now, I kind of got the feedback from a guy I respect in the business, who I just asked him what he thought of whether this fight would go to a decision or not, what he thought the right number would be. He quickly shot out minus 700. So obviously the 300 wasn't the best line out there, but you can probably find something comparable still. But minus 300 is where I took sharp action on that one.
No, that makes perfect sense. I wrote up a UFC 220 preview earlier on in the week, and those dudes are going to throw. And this is a card I'm actually interested in. Generally speaking, I'm not a big UFC guy. I'll research it, put up the preview over at BangTheBook.com. But with Miocic being a local guy here from the Cleveland area, that's a fight that I am very interested in. And it always intrigues me. And, quite frankly, Brent, as we'll wrap this thing up for today here, when you talk about heavyweight fights, I mean, I'm honestly inclined to just go ahead and take a shot on the dog almost no matter what, because one big shot, whoever lands that first big shot, the thing may be over. So taking Miocic, the current champion, as a pretty big underdog here, I mean, why not roll the dice with a fight that may not make it out of the first round either?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you. I'm kind of surprised the price is what it is. And I think maybe just kind of, the fanfare on Ngannou kind of drove that one up. But you look at it in terms of, what has he done? And again, yeah, he's had a couple of decent wins against. But I mean, over him, I mean, he's been rather chinny for quite a while now. I think, he got exposed quite a while ago with his first knockout, I guess it was, to, Bigfoot Silva, who just crushed him, and then Brown crushed him. Rothwell crushed him. I mean, he keeps losing by knockout. So it's kind of, was it a huge surprise that he got knocked out by a big banger? Not really at all. So in terms of what this guy's done so far, I don't know. Not a whole lot from what I see. So it's going to definitely be an interesting fight. And I think, just the fact that Miocic has a little bit more variety in terms of his game. But again, how easy is he going to take this guy down? So there's a lot of questions involving this fight. And I think the line myself, I mean, it just seems like a little bit too high. This price opened minus 165, and it's been bet up to like 85 and 80 right now. So I just think it's headed in the wrong direction. If it jumps back down, by fight night, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Well, Brent, risk manager down there at DSI Sportsbook, we appreciate your view from the other side of the counter with us here each week. Thank you so much for that, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Have a great weekend, Adam.